Let me tell you something about Mona that's really special and unique, is that not only is she an MD, but she's also an ND, a naturopathic doctor. So she has the Eastern, Western, both side view of things, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She is a board-certified family physician, board-certified in integrative medicine. She's a functional medicine physician. She's been practicing for 17 years. When did you start? She moved from San Francisco last year, where she worked as a doctor at Facebook. That's something I never knew. That's really cool. And she's now practicing at Pacific Pearl in La Jolla, an integrative medicine clinic. She says she has a deep passion for helping people develop their best health using cutting-edge science and technology. So guys, let's hear it for Dr. Mona.
One second.
Larry, you can't get away with that.
All right. Thanks, guys. I'm really excited to be here. Very grateful to be here. I was at the event yesterday, the workout, and I just want to say community is really important. All of the things that we'll talk about today are for your own health, but really a big part of your health is being part of a good community, and a healthy community, to top it off, is really, really important. So today we're going to talk about scientific biohacks to kind of get your best self. We're coming to the end of the year, new year coming up. It's a good time to maybe set up some new information and new tactics that you could look at. So just a little bit about functional medicine. You know, most of the time in medicine we live up here. You see the specialist when you have an issue. You have signs and symptoms. You get kind of triggered off to different specialists. In functional medicine, we want to kind of work down here and in the roots. So we're looking at sort of how your systems work together, your digestion, your immune system, your mitochondria, how well you detoxify toxins that you're exposed to, your endocrine system, your hormones, your adrenals, and cardiovascular system, and then your structural system, which is your musculoskeletal and skin. And then, you know, looking at your family history. What is the family history, and which can be antecedents, which are, you know, predisposing things that can lead into changes in your health, your genetics. And then we use the lifestyle to help build the roots back up so that the tree is healthy again. So that's kind of where we focus. And when we see a patient, we take all this history, and this sort of helps us to organize your history. And of course, we always want to look at your mental, emotional, and spiritual balance, because this is really key to helping you make those lifestyle changes. And you can see relationships is a big factor in your health as well. So Hippocrates said all disease begins in the gut. There's a lot of great research kind of coming out about the gut microbiome. So we have a number of different microbiomes in our body. We have a skin microbiome, you have an oral microbiome, the lungs, and then the gut as well. So the microbiome in the gut is made of bacteria, viruses, archaea, which are old type of bacteria, and yeast. They contribute to your metabolic function. They protect you against pathogens, educate your immune system. So when children are born and growing up, kind of putting things in their mouth, that's part of us educating our immune system, what is outside of our body and what is self. And it communicates with our brain. There is a gut-brain axis. So those microbes connect and talk with your brain, and vice versa. There's a conversation going on. And those bacteria also produce a lot of vitamins, which are essential for your health. They communicate with your mitochondria, which are powerhouses of the cell, and we'll talk about those a little bit later in the talk. And they produce something called N-butyrate, which is a byproduct when your microbiome takes in the foods that you eat, high fiber foods especially. They produce something called N-butyrate, which helps protect your colon cells. So partly for colon cancer, we think about trying to increase fiber to increase N-butyrate, which helps with the colon and protect against that. Also N-butyrate, very important for the brain. So how much of us is microbes? This is really interesting research kind of coming out, talking about we're kind of made more about microbial cells than we are human cells. So some people, there's a researcher at Stanford who's written a book about the microbiome, and his theory we're not really humans, we're just transports for the, for the microbiome. We just carry them around. They run the show, we're just carrying them around. But a lot of really interesting research coming out and trying to understand how does this microbiome affect our health and make us healthy throughout our lifetime. So friendly bacteria, again, kind of looking at how they regulate our system. So they impact our mood, they affect the brain axis, they regulate appetite. Some types of bacteria take in more of your nutrients, so they sort of affect the hormones that can affect your appetite suppression or appetite stimulation, because for them, they want more calories. So sometimes that can be a component of how our appetite is regulated. They sustain the GI tract and promote healthy digestion, help to control our metabolism. Again, your immune system is regulated a lot through the microbiome. We have something called the GALT system, which is gut-associated lymphoid tissue. It's sort of sitting there, and its job is to protect in case you eat bacteria, you eat something that's going to cause you to be ill. The immune system is there to react against it. So the microbiome helps to regulate that immune system. They help to digest our food and then providing essential vitamins and nutrients. So how does the gut affect our brain and body? Again, lots of research coming out looking at the different types of specific bacteria and how they connect. But you can see a lot of different diagnoses and research, again, kind of going into things like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, which are inflammatory bowel disease, Parkinson's disease. A lot of research coming out showing that the gut microbiome may be a big factor in affecting Parkinson's disease. A lot of people with Parkinson's have constipation as an initial symptom. They think, well, is this related to a change in the microbiome that eventually causes a neurodegenerative disease? Schizophrenia, obesity and diabetes, colon cancer, autism. There's a lot of talk about using better gut or affecting the gut bacteria to help children who have autism. And then again, kind of breaking down what are the good guys, what are the bad guys. There's a lot, again, of research going on. UCSD is actually a big part of this. They have Rob Knight in his lab at UCSD looking at what's called the American Gut Program. So you can send in your stool, be citizen science, and help for them to research and figure out, well, what are the good ones? What are the ones that are associated with the change in health and affecting our health over time? And eventually, I was just at a conference 2 weeks ago where, you know, it's looking at technology and some people looking at a smart toilet. So you can have your stool sample in the morning and they tell you, okay, here's your readout of what you've got. This is something you should be eating today to increase a certain type of bacteria. So that, you know, sounds science fiction, but not too far in the future, we may have these types of things going on. So how do you keep your microbiome healthy? You got to eat real food. So eating real food, especially fruits, vegetables, high fiber foods, things that are going to give the microbiome lots of nutrients to work with. So when we see people eating too many processed foods, which take away a lot of that fiber component and all the nutrients that you get from eating from the rainbow. So I have a check-off chart for my kids. We try to go through and say, you know, what colors did you eat today? And so they can just kind of pay attention and look at, okay, what are the colors? And you know, when you sit down and look at your plate, trying to see how many colors are you eating. You want to go for 3 to 5 different colors because they all provide different nutrients, phytonutrients, which again help your overall health, but also for the microbiome. So there's also, I'm sure you've probably heard about probiotics, and we usually like in functional medicine to try to go with food as your probiotic. There are pills of probiotics, which are great. They give you usually 8 to 10 different strains of bacteria in each pill. But when you're taking a probiotic, you're sort of getting those same bacteria each time. So if you do a probiotic, you want to switch every 3 months or so. Switch to a different probiotic just so you get a variety of different microbes. But food can also have lots of good bugs in it. So fermented foods in particular. So kefir, fermented yogurt. Yogurt that's plain, not sweetened. The sweetened has lots and lots of sugar in it. If you tolerate dairy. Other things, fermented vegetables, kimchi, sauerkraut, that should be natto. Natto is a fermented soybean that's very traditional in Japanese culture. We talked about probiotic supplements, and then prebiotics are foods that actually also feed the bacteria. So probiotics are foods that have bacteria in them. Prebiotics are going to feed those good microbes. So these are things like asparagus, dandelion greens, sunchokes, jicama, leeks, onion, and garlic. So if you're cooking with the onion and garlic, you're feeding your microbiome. So when you're cooking later tonight, you can think about your microbiome. And then the gut-brain connection. So many of our neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. In fact, serotonin, you have more serotonin receptors in your gut than you do in the brain. So this is a really important factor. N-butyrate is a byproduct of the colonic bacteria digesting fiber. So again, N-butyrate also translates through to the brain. B vitamins are made by your bacteria in your gut. So you need B vitamins in order to produce things like dopamine. So you want to get that microbiome working to the best it can. And then the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a huge nerve that runs from your brain to the gut, and there's a discussion kind of going on. Your vagus nerve is one of the main producers for your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest nervous system. So we have the sympathetic, fight or flight. We have the parasympathetic. So when you're in a more vagal tone, you're more calm, you can digest, and there's a relationship between the brain and the gut with that. So here we look again at the gut-brain axis. So the gut influence on neurotransmitters, stress and anxiety, mood and behavior, and then the brain coming back down also with weight, bowel movements, nutrient delivery, and it affects the microbiome balance. So there's a discussion going on in your body. And so that kind of brings us into stress, which we talked about the vagus nerve as being the big component of the parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest. We also want to think about this thing called the HPA axis, which is your hypothalamus-pituitary axis. So the hypothalamus in the brain signals to the pituitary when you're under stress, tells the adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys, to make cortisol. Cortisol affects the microbiome and the gut, but also affects lots of other systems in our body. And then again, a feedback loop. So metabolic effects go back, should we stay in stress or do we calm down? So this is when we're talking about when we're under, we're supposed to be in this system for short bursts. If you look at, animals in the animal kingdom, they run when they're being chased. And then they calm down and they're snacking or they're going around with the rest of the animals. For us, because we're kind of on this stress loop, this system is just continuing to get triggered on a longer basis than it was really designed to be. So that's where we can run into trouble. So cortisol has a diurnal pattern. It has a pattern that goes through the day. It spikes in the morning to get us up in the morning between 6 and 8 a.m. So you can see this kind of spike up here. And then by noon, it starts to come down. By 4 p.m., it really comes down. And then by midnight, it should be coming down to the lower level because that's when melatonin will be produced, growth hormone, all the restorative parts of the body to help you rest from the day's activities. So we have this pattern that's normal for us. But if you've been under chronic stress, you start to see people don't want to get out of bed in the morning. They don't want to get up. It's really hard to get going. Need my 3 cups of coffee before I can even do anything. Caffeine increases cortisol, so oftentimes that's where we're kind of relying on that to get us going. And then you start to see this sort of flattening effect, and for some people, we'll see patients who will actually spike up at midnight. So now they're sort of that wired and tired. I can't sleep, my brain is going, I can't rest. So a lot of this can be related to the amount of cortisol and a dysregulation of cortisol through the day. So what does stress do to our body? So we talked a little bit about fatigue, decreased mood, hard to concentrate, hard to focus, changes in your skin texture, loss of skin tone, thinner, more delicate skin, narrowing of the arteries, so we see blood pressure starting to go up, increased blood glucose. When you're under a lot of stress, cortisol signals to the body to release glucose because it's part of your fight or flight response. So you'll see blood sugar going up. Decreased nutrient absorption, alterations in the gut microbiome and the gut motility, and something called leaky gut. When the gut lining is not quite as strong, sometimes food particles can get through and start causing immune reactions to food. So you may start to have reactions to dairy, or you can't eat this food, or you can't eat that food, a lot of times because of stress and a change in the microbiome. Decreased immunity. Probably you've experienced that where you're under a lot of stress. The stress sort of goes away, and then all of a sudden you get sick. So a lot of times that stress will kind of keep you going, but then when it releases, you may have a tendency to get sick a little bit easier. Hormonal imbalances. So cortisol is made on a path of steroid hormones. They're all the same hormones: testosterone, DHEA, estrogen, progesterone, all made on the same pathway. When the body's under stress, it sort of drops some of those sex hormones because it's saying, okay, we just need to survive this time. We're going to focus on making cortisol and forget the rest of the pathways. So people start to have symptoms of low hormones because of the chronic stress and the change in the metabolism of their hormones. And then muscle protein breakdown. It's harder to kind of get that response from your workouts or get that kind of energy to go and do your workouts. And stress affects the brain quite as much as well. So chronic stress is going to lead into inadequate sleep. You might not make as many good decisions about your diet when you're under more stress and you haven't been sleeping as well. More emotional distress, and that will increase the amount of corticosteroids, which are glucocorticoids, which are the cortisol pathways, which leads to cellular changes in the hippocampus, changes in your regulation of cortisol, and then attention, perception, short-term memory, learning, and word finding tend to go down. So harder to function at that higher level in your mind and do the things you want to do when you're under chronic stress and you have this cascade that continues to go on. So how do we manage cortisol? Sleep. Sleep is probably one of the big factors for helping you with that. And we're kind of an always-on society, so one of the things, we stay up late at night working on computers, looking at iPads. There's a lot of new products out that are blocking light. So this is one that you can put on, and it's just to block out the blue lights so you don't get that stimulation into your eyes. And what that does is help you keep your melatonin production, because if you're getting a lot of blue light, you're going to have a decrease of the melatonin production. Caffeine is another big one. So we now know that there's genetic tendencies of how well you metabolize caffeine. And if anyone's done their 23andMe testing, the gene testing, but you probably just know from your own experience, there are genetic metabolisms, or how well we metabolize caffeine. So some people can have caffeine late in the day, doesn't affect their sleep. Other people, it will really disrupt their sleep because caffeine's half-life is about 7 hours. So if you are someone who's sensitive and you're having caffeine 1 or 2 in the afternoon, it may be not until 10 o'clock until you're really metabolizing that caffeine out. So it may be blocking your ability to get a good night of sleep. And then having a rhythm to your sleep. Trying to get up around the same time every day, go to bed around the same time, kind of trying to stay with the light and how our bodies were sort of traditionally set up to function with that circadian rhythm. Meditation is another really great factor. So numerous studies showing meditation, mindfulness, very good for controlling cortisol, helps to keep the brain healthy. There's a newer device that's out called the Muse. I brought a little one here. So this is a brain sensing headband. You wear it around here, and it comes with an app. And so it will coach you in your meditation. So you can pick different scenes, and I usually do the beach scene. And when you're listening to the beach scene, if you're out of a meditative state, the waves will get more intense. So you're hearing it getting more intense, so you focus back into your breath. If you're in a calm state, you'll hear birds kind of coming into the background. So it gives you some reinforcement while you're doing the meditation that you're in a meditative state, you're doing well with it. And they have guided meditations, they have just sound, but it's a really nice tool to sort of feel, well, what does it feel like to be in meditation, and how should I be feeling while I'm doing this? And then if you're a data junkie, you can keep all that data and you can record it and see how you're doing over time and how your meditation practice is improving. HRV training is heart rate variability. So this is really important for keeping our health over time. And this is, again, your balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And there are ways to train for that. So HeartMath is a tool, device that goes on your ear, picks up your pulse, and then it also has a coaching device. So it has a breathing mandala in the middle, and then it will show red if you're too far into the sympathetic nervous system. You're too much of the fight or flight, and it'll coach you. Take a deep breath, breathe, imagine something relaxing. And then as you go from red, you go to blue, and then you want to get into a green zone, and then you time out and see how long you can stay in that green zone. There's also a great app that's made from a group from San Francisco that you wake up in the morning and you put your finger on the camera of your phone, and it'll record your heart rate variability. You usually have to do it for about 1 minute. And you do that every day for 7 days. And they start to get a trend of where you are with your parasympathetic and sympathetic balance. And then if the next day you wake up, you do it, they tell you, okay, you're still too high on a heart rate variability. You need to do an easier workout today. Or nope, you're ready to go. Get out there and do that. This is what a lot of elite athletes are using to help them with their training so that they're not overtraining and they're not depleting their body. Yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, all very good practices, a lot because you're, again, in a parasympathetic mode and you're working with your breath, so which helps a lot with bringing cortisol down. Adaptogens are herbs that are from the Ayurvedic tradition from India. So these are things like ashwagandha, rhodiola. They help to sort of tonify the cortisol production. So if we see patients in the clinic who've been under a lot of stress and they have that path that was the diagram that I was showing where it's just low all through the day and they can't get out of bed, can't get going, sometimes we'll use some adaptogens to sort of help them get back on track and get going through the day. Ashwagandha is very good if your cortisol has been high and you're just really stressed out. It just helps to bring that down a little bit more. And then exercise is great for cortisol. So doing short burst exercise, if you're really tired and you're really stressed, can be very helpful to bring cortisol back down. So that brings us into mitochondria, which are also very responsive to exercise. So these are the powerhouse of your cells. So they produce all of your ATP, all the energy that's being produced in the body. They take your macronutrients, your fats, proteins, carbohydrates, and turn that into cellular energy to feed your body. They require cofactors to make the Krebs cycle work, so B vitamins. So we go back to the microbiome, and the B vitamins the microbiome's making are helping your cells to produce energy. Magnesium, also really important to help with that Krebs cycle and the energy production. And the highest density of mitochondria, your brain, your heart, your skeletal muscle, and your liver require quite a bit of energy, so that's where a lot of the mitochondria are focused. And they also keep us healthy over our lifetime. So the more our mitochondria tend to go down after age 40. So we want to really think about, well, how do I keep those mitochondria working? And there's a lot of factors you can do in your lifestyle to help keep those mitochondria density up. So mitochondrial dysfunction has been associated with lots of different diseases, chronic conditions, because again, they are the powerhouse, they're the cells that make up all the energy. You want to keep them healthy over your lifetime. So this is just taking you back to chemistry, biochemistry. This is looking at the Krebs cycle. We actually do tests that can give us information like this. So seeing how well you use your macronutrients to kind of feed into making NADH, and that's going to go into your electron transport channel, which is making your ATP. But these little green things are cofactors. So this is iron, B vitamins, magnesium, manganese, glutathione. These are all things that your body needs to be able to keep up with the energy production. So if you've been under a lot of stress, you may be low in B vitamins and then needing some help to get this Krebs cycle ultimately going. So this is, these are a lot of different factors, but what happens when you do muscle act? You get all these different cascade of triggers that start to tell the body, okay, we're exercising, transcribe this gene, make this gene work, and all this is leading into more mitochondria and angiogenesis, more blood flow. The muscles need more blood flow, but you're also increasing your mitochondrial density. So again, we said, after age 40, it's going down. Exercise will help quite a bit with this. Weightlifting, Cardiovascular exercise, they think probably high intensity is probably more beneficial than doing long training, which for some people will deplete their body too much. So doing short burst cardiovascular exercise and weight training seems to be most beneficial for keeping the mitochondrial production highest. So calorie restriction. There is an experiment done where they, I think it was the Biosphere, they kept people inside for 2 years. They put them on a calorie restriction because they said, okay, well, we know that this is really helpful to keeping mitochondria levels up. Very hard to do, and people don't feel good when they do a lot of this calorie restrictions, hard to keep up over time. So what's been kind of more popular recently is a ketogenic diet. So any of you guys doing intermittent fasting? A little intermittent fasting, yeah, good. So intermittent fasting is one way to kind of get that same result of the calorie restriction. So this is where you may not eat for 12 or 14 hours. So you do usually overnight and then skip breakfast and kind of wait a little bit longer in the day before you start to consume calories. Tends to be, looks like it's probably good for the gut too, because you give a little rest to the gut, maybe helping to clear things out in the body. There's a whole pathway of how cells kind of clean themselves out to get rid of old cells and produce new ones, and sometimes fasting can be really helpful for that. Ketogenic diet is more gearing towards doing more fats in your diet rather than carbohydrates. So it's usually quite low carbohydrate intake, moderate amount of protein, and a higher amount of fats. And originally this diet, it's not a new diet. It's been here probably since the 20s, and they used it for children who had seizures. And they didn't know how to control the seizure. So when they started to put kids on high-fat diets, the seizure levels went down. Because fats are very good for the brain, calm the brain down. You make something called hydroxybutyrate, and so that's very good for the brain to keep your brain focused, but and tends to calm the brain down. So these kids were able to go seizure-free when they do, and they still use this for children with seizures because the drugs are so toxic, have a lot of side effects for children. So if they can get away with not using a medication and they want to use a diet, you can try this out. So good fats are what you want to focus in on. Avocado, coconut oil, olive oil, nuts and seeds, all kind of give you some good fats, which help also to keep you full and you're not over-consuming calories. The question a lot of people are looking at is how long should you be in ketosis, and is it different for men and women? You know, maybe it affects women's hormones a little bit too much and they may not do that. There's probably a genetic tendency of how long you can be in ketosis because people go back to sort of ancestral health and think, well, you know, when we were hunters and gatherers, there were times where we didn't have access to food. So, you know, people, depending on where you come from in the world, genetically probably went longer without food than others. So, you know, as we learn more about the genomics and understand that a little bit better, we can sort of help people choose when to do this diet or if it's even the right thing for them to do. But it does tend to help with, does tend to help with keeping your mitochondria healthy as well. So this is a slide just showing different factors of how we also increase mitochondria. And so hormesis is a stress to the body, but it's a good stress. Hormesis is usually when the body's under a small amount of stress, it actually increases the effectiveness of how the body responds. And so one of the things that we look at besides exercise as being a hormetic pathway, the heat stress too. So saunas, being in a warm environment can actually increase the mitochondria, and it turns on something called superoxide dismutase and glutathione, which are both antioxidants for the body and also increase the amount of mitochondria that are being produced in the body. The other part is cold stress. So we did yesterday in the workout, we did some Wim Hof breathing. So Wim Hof is known as the Iceman. He is able to submerge himself in ice for I think it's an hour and 38 minutes and keep his core body temperature. So cold stress actually is very good for the mitochondria. It also can help turn white fat into something called brown fat, which is more metabolically active. So when you're taking your shower, if you want to do the last few seconds on cold and just sort of get that benefit, that's one way. Cold plunges can be another way to do that. So you stimulate these pathways which increase the amount of mitochondria being produced. But you can see again, exercise, hypoxia, they're looking more at Hypoxia is low oxygen. This is when you're doing intermittent high-intensity training. You sort of can be a little bit breathless. You're in an anaerobic state, so that can increase some of the factors that make you make more mitochondria. And then again, nutrient deprivation is sort of cutting down on how much you're eating. Green tea is another good one for the mitochondria. So lots of antioxidants in green tea also helps to kind of build up the mitochondria and with their effectiveness as well. So I want to kind of wrap up on looking at toxins. The Environmental Working Group is a great resource, and they have apps that you can download on your phone. And one of their apps is called Skin Deep, which helps you to choose. For women, cosmetics can be a big exposure to toxins. So they help you they've gone through and looked at which cosmetics have what ingredients and what are better ones to use. Lotions, shampoos, I mean, skin is our biggest organ, and everything you put on your skin gets absorbed into your body. So you want to be really mindful of what you're using and what your kids are using and what kind of chemicals are in those products that you may be exposed to. And they also every year make something called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And this is to help people decide which foods should I buy organic, which is your Dirty Dozen. Strawberries are usually the top of the list every time. Lots of pesticides sprayed on strawberries. So you want to buy organic strawberries. Spinach, nectarines, apples, most of the things that you're going to eat, kind of the peel of it, you want to try to buy those organic. And they have an app for your phone, so if you're at the grocery store and you're like, what was that thing I need to buy organic? You can just look on the app and it'll remind you which ones. And then the Clean 15 are the ones that you don't necessarily have to buy organic. These are okay to buy just conventional foods, and you're not going to be having a big exposure to toxins. So a summary of the biohacks. Again, Hippocrates, let food be thy medicine. Food, eat real food, lots of different colors, feed your microbiome, get some probiotics and prebiotic foods into your diet. If you haven't tried fermented vegetables, try them out. They're, it's a little different. It has a little more bitter taste, but they're great for your body. And it's an acquired thing that you can get used to. Benjamin Franklin said the best of all medicines are fasting and resting. So we talked about intermittent fasting for your mitochondria, resting for your adrenals and your HPA axis, helping to get your breath back, doing a little bit of yoga, meditation. To enjoy the good glow of health, you must exercise. So exercise, beneficial for your microbiome, for your adrenals, and for your mitochondria. And then Napoleon, water, air, and cleanliness are the chief articles in my pharmacy. So try to eat clean, choose those foods that the Dirty Dozen, try to buy those organically. Be careful about what you put on your skin, what you're using, cosmetics and shampoos, and trying to keep, we didn't talk about water, but clean water as well. If you can filter your water, that's another big component to staying healthy over the time. So I think we're all superheroes. We have our own superhero ability, and so getting good health really helps you to have the energy and the access and the mental capacity to kind of be at your best self. So thank you.
Guys, Dr. Mona, thank you so much. Who found that stuff helpful? I know that you guys have some questions for her, so if you have any questions, we're going to break for 3 short minutes. If you want to connect with Dr. Gable, Dr. Mona, please do. Also, a couple things. Last chance for raffle tickets. In the next 3 minutes, get your raffle tickets. Sign up for our holiday contest up front. Grab a save the date. We have printed out save the dates for a couple things going on in the next month, and one of those being our client appreciation holiday party, December 29th. So grab a save the date. 3 minutes. We'll be right back in your seats, ready to rock and roll. I know you're not going to want to miss my man, Mr. Durkin. He never disappoints.